Discovery is one of the most fundamental pieces of building a product, and if done incorrectly or skipped, most efforts afterward will be at high risk of failure. Let's talk through what needs to be done during the discovery phase. So, what we want to build is a product that hopefully will need some sort of AI, but we will need to properly validate that assumption and slowly get there. The first few things that we have to figure out are epic meaning, business strategy, and product strategy. Let's start by epic meaning. This is a narrative about what you want to do and why. Remember the so what exercise that we did. That's how you come up with your narrative. Epic meaning is the way that you communicate how what you're building results in a great future and how the world would be at a loss without your solution. Next, you articulate how you make enough money with your product to sustain it and what your plan is for that. Even if you are part of a corporate team, this could be the difference between a well-funded project and a science fair kind of project. Finally, you have to talk about your plans for building and delivering the features needed to solve the problem. These three components have a bit of a logical flow. You need epic meaning to define your business strategy, and you need that to define your product strategy. Otherwise, you might end up with a product that doesn't deliver on your business metrics or doesn't fulfill your ultimate goal. These three are closely related to three types of risk that you have to tackle right in the discovery phase. Epic meaning is closely related to value or desirability lists. In other words, the way you reach to your epic meaning is by ensuring what you want to build solves a meaningful problem for some users to a level that they desire it. Next, your business strategy has to clarify how the viability risk is mitigated. In other words, here you want to make sure that you can reach enough people who will pay you enough to cover your cost and also have a profit to be able to grow. Lastly, the feasibility risk. Can you actually implement what you're promising? It is important to notice that there could be a lot of back and forth between these until you reach a situation where everything makes sense. For example, if the solution that you can realistically implement is too costly compared to what you originally imagined, your viability might be at danger and you have to reconsider it. Or you might find something that people want but not at the price point that can make your product viable. In your discovery stage, and where you're trying to figure out the desirability of your product, you have to answer the following questions. Who has the problem that I am solving? This needs to be very specific. The answer to that question can't be something as general as farmers. It should be something more like owners of a small to medium-sized farms who live in X and Y and Z geographical location. The next question is, what is a specific problem that they have? It can't be something like they need to be more efficient. That's way too broad. It needs to be something like time and cost associated with use of pesticide is taking away 10% of their margin. That's very specific. Finally, what do they do right now? You have to have a good understanding of their current workflow to be able to identify their pain points and come up with a solution for them. For viability, you want to know the market numbers. Is the total number of potential users times how much they are realistically willing to pay you enough to cover your costs and even grow? Do they already have a good enough solution through a competitor? Then why would they switch to you? People have a lot of inertia in terms of what they're currently using. And more importantly, can you effectively reach them? If they exist but you have no way to reach them, or you can reach them but there is no easy way to build trust with them, then they are as good as non-existent. Finally, how can you implement your solution? Should you buy it? Should you partner with someone about it? Or should you build it? In most cases, the answer is a combination of all. This is admittedly one of the biggest issues that developers have, including data scientists and machine learning engineers. They usually dismissively say, of course we can build it, but the question is, should you? Assuming that you have done your homework right and you know which parts you should build and which parts you should partner or buy, let's talk about the parts that you should build. For those parts, you should ask yourself what the minimum set of features necessary to build the product is. And based on that answer, you have to determine the necessary technology architecture, infrastructure, technology stack, team members, datasets to use, and the delivery mechanism that is most appropriate. We will get into these in more detail later. Finally, just to emphasize, you do the desirability discovery by talking to potential users, viability by doing market research, and feasibility by doing technology research. Okay, that was a lot of information. Let's go through some examples and discuss some activities that you should do. First, epic meaning. You need to come up with a tagline or a mission statement along with a narrative. Use what you did before in one of the earlier activities to write these. Remember that for this, you need to interview your target user demographic to validate all the assumptions that you're making. Without that, everything that you're writing is just assumptions. Even if you are a farmer, the way you do things is not necessarily reflective of how people you're trying to sell to do things. You can pause the video here and read the examples. The example that I wrote here about our farmer friends. Keep in mind that all the numbers that you see here and everywhere are made up, but you should use real stats when you write your own narrative. Next, let's look at business strategy. There are many frameworks for this, and it can be super detailed and complex, like doing very detailed financial models. But for all intents and purposes, we can do a quick back of envelope or so-called Fermi estimate. You can pause the video to read what I wrote here for our farmer friends. But notice that there are two parts here. The first part is how much money can you realistically make, and the second part is how much would you have to pay to make that happen. I'm glossing over a lot of detail about how the business strategy works. But a part that I do think is important to emphasize is the competitive space analysis to determine your product positioning. People do this in many different ways, like drawing up a table with features and competitors and a bunch of check marks. But I think one of the most powerful ways to do this is the concept of Ideamaze. Essentially, what you want to do is to identify all the relevant parameters and dimensions that exist in the problem space that you're trying to work in. Then you draw up a decision tree where junctions happen, where different values of each dimension split, and the leaves are the products that exist in the market. Now, the powerful thing that you can do here is that you include both successful and failed products to demonstrate what ideas are already explored and didn't work. Finally, you position your product in the right place to show how you differentiate versus the competition. Here is an example of how that works. This is the Ideamaze that positions a company like Netflix in the context. Again, pause the video and take a deeper look at this. It is borrowed from a lecture note that was originally proposed. You can find it in the first link. You could also check out the second link that talks about using Ideamaze in the context of AI startups. Now, let's talk about product strategy. Hopefully, through your early discoveries, you have identified a quantitatively measurable target that if you achieve will provide significant value to your users. Let's say for our farmer friends, it is reducing annual cost of pesticide. That will be your success metric. You will be done when that's meaningfully reduced from whatever is the current baseline. Then hopefully again, from your discovery, you know that the important factors contributing to this are frequency of use, amount used, cost per kilogram, and cost of labor. Let's say that you also know the baseline value for each of these, so that you know what you're aiming for based on your conversations with the farmers. Next, you determine the product feature that can impact each of these dimensions. For example, for frequency, you might want to help the farmer by telling them when to apply pesticides rather than a regularly scheduled time period that they currently use. Let's hope that your research has also informed you that given all constraints, logistically for them and implementation-wise for you, you identified that tackling the frequency issue will give you the best return on investment. And then as a second option, the amount issue is what you should be tackling. So these two are the priority product features, and you start building the core feature of your product based on those. For that, you come up with a timeline that is realistic and start implementing based on that. We flew through this so quickly, so feel free to pause the video and check out the details as closely as you want. And of course, remember, all the numbers, dimensions, and priorities here are just for sake of demonstration. After the first round of interviews, and assuming that everything went well, you have lots of information that you use to draft up your epic, meaning your business and product strategies. However, you're just at the beginning of talking to users. Once you have that information, you need to verify that you didn't misunderstand anything. A good way to do that is to draw a very basic mock-up of what you think your app would look like. And then take it back to the same users and have a conversation with them and see if things still make sense to them or if you misunderstood anything. The goal here is to ensure that you're on the same page with them about the problem and the solution. A few tips that you have to remember looking at this example mock-up that I did for the farmers. You should remember that you should never use color or complex shapes because those are distracting and will distract the farmer from the main concepts that you're trying to test. You have to make it as simple as possible. Do not do a multi-page app mock-up because you're not doing a usability test. You just want to make sure that they understand the problem the way you did and they understand the solution the way you do. Just use it as a visual cue for the conversation to make sure that you're trying to do what they still want. And of course, record their feedback so that you can go back to it and make decisions based on it. There is a lot to do in the discovery phase, as you can see, and it is no wonder why so many projects that skip this phase fail. Remember that you want to be as efficient as possible through all the steps that you have to do. The key is to iterate over them and learn more as you go on. All of these artifacts will evolve over time, and the only thing that you should barely change is your high-level mission and its corresponding problem statement. Everything else will evolve as you learn more.